Hello guys and gals and welcome! So today we got some Diablo 2 Resurrected news. It's always a good day when we get a little bit of Diablo 2 Resurrected news, and I like to bring that news to you. So right at the top of the screen here, I know you can't see it because I've got my thing messed up here. It says, bringing the original Diablo 2 experience to console, and it was just published about an hour ago. I always like to bring this to you as quickly as possible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read it. I'm going to interject my thoughts, and it is rather lengthy. So get yourself a drink, and sit down, and we'll go over it together. The wait is almost over. Champions will return to Sanctuary to follow the Dark Wanderer and rid the realm of Hell's minions soon. The iconic ARPG Diablo 2 has been remastered and resurrected. Diablo 2 releases September 23rd, 2021. But unlike the original, players across Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch systems will now be able to embark on the famous Quest East. We invited design director Robert Gallerati to share the development team's approach and experience trying to adapt this PC classic to contemporary consoles. This remaster is a labor of love, crafted to stir nostalgia and veteran players and introduce new players to the world of Sanctuary. In this development journey, we strived to build the game as players remember, rather than what it actually was. That's an interesting statement. For instance, graphical improvements are intended to authentically represent the original game, and it's only when you toggle to the legacy of a mode and look back at the original graphics that you can appreciate the evolution forged from this title. Then there are the small details, like the sound of a potion being drank. Gotta drink that potion. Or the way something is drawn on the mini-map. Or even the way monsters appear when a character enters a dark room. All minor elements that contribute to the fond memories of the original experience. When we developed this game and decided to bring it over to the Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch systems, it wasn't just the game balance that needed to be exact, but other subconscious elements players may not have realized when playing the original title over 2 decades ago. So what happens when we bring the game to a platform it has never existed on before? Bringing a game initially built for keyboard and mouse on a PC to console brought up many questions that needed to be answered, we needed to answer, especially with a console player's playstyle in mind. Because our vision is to preserve the classic experience, we started with what we couldn't change. Having cross-progression gave us a robust set of restrictions and guidelines to adhere to. Because of this, while we couldn't make any game changes, we focused on changing how the content can be experienced on a new platform. The first and most obvious way is the way a console plays the game, namely a controller. With a keyboard and mouse, the player can act as the eye in the sky, telling their character what to do and where to go by clicking somewhere. Do you perform a ranged ability on a monster? Do you walk over to a chest and open it? Perhaps you open a door. With the mouse, the player's primary input is a click that conveys aiming or a specific ability or an action. And the game then guides the character to the place where it can perform the action, finding a path for you. However, on controller, the player is more directly acts as their character. This starts to have serious ramifications at many levels for design, but to our players, it all just needs to work. Movement on controller. When playing on a controller, movement is bound to thumbstick. So the player, rather than the game, will direct where the character moves. For this to work, we turned off the game's pathfinding on console, and as a result, players can now travel the places the game would have never guided you before. An example of this is a player now being able to run their character into a wall or move against collision objects. With this freedom of movement, it's easier to avoid attacks and enemies beyond determining where to go. You also need to determine how fast you go. Diablo 2 has a stamina framework. This implies that there are 2 methods of movement, walking and running, at the point where your stamina drains. You can no longer run. At the point when your stamina drains, you can no longer run. We wanted to have this framework work in parallel with the player's assumptions that when you push the thumbstick a bit, you move a modest amount, and when you push it as far as possible, you move at maximum speed. Walking gives your character better stats in the game, so it was critical we made it simple for players to control this. We went with a toggle, as it preserved the conscious decision of opting to walk rather than run. This was imperative for looting, however, more on that later. So they have an interesting image here, and this is something that I've tried to explain to everyone on stream quite a few times. So there is this actual hidden grid underneath of the the scenes, essentially, and the grid indicates where you can walk and where you're standing and where monsters can stand when they're attacking you, and so forth and so on. So as you can see, if you were standing in one particular place, there's only so many grid points around you that monsters can be to attack you, except for ghosts. Ghosts can stack up on you like the worst nightmare you've ever had in your life, which is always a fun thing. Alright, so next we have targeting on controller. And in the footage above, red squares represent map collision, while the white line in front of the character represents the trajectory of the thumbstick on the controller. Okay. Alright, targeting on controller. The next substantial contrast when not having a mouse is not having a cursor. That means you don't have a way to direct the game on what to target and attack. To address this with a thumbstick on the controller, we are continually examining the playfield with erroneous cone and prioritizing targets at many levels, including monsters, items, objects you can interact with, different players, your corpse, and more. Additionally, the priorities are tweaked by class. An example of this is the Necromancer. The Necromancer prioritizes corpses more than other classes do. At one point, we tried showing a player all the different targeting options, but it was incredibly overwhelming on the HUD. So we made the decision to just show player their class's primary targeting. Ultimately, even though we don't show a corpse being highlighted, the nearest one is selected because it's closest should the player trigger an ability that requires a corpse. Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, the game does kind of have like this little cone that goes out, and it really kind of, like auto targets things within that cone. It's definitely obvious. You can tell, like especially in this little video right here where they're showing, the item that the cone has decided to target turns blue, and the only way to change what item your little cone is targeting is to change the position of your character. And it's a freaking Zod rune on the ground. It's a nice example. I got a Zod rune just laying on the ground. Alright. And a perfect emerald. I feel like they chose these items and put them here on purpose. Alright, so looting on controller. That is the blue outline now. That's interesting. Plundering the foes you've killed is just as important as killing them. Players normally loot with keyboard and mouse by holding a key to see the item's label, and afterwards they would click on the name. For some, holding a button on controller can be uncomfortable, so we eliminated the need to hold down the item label button, although it's still present. When utilizing a controller, item names are revealed by two factors, time and distance. So if an item is closer, if an item is close to a player, it will always be visible. What's more, when an item drops, the name of the item will display on screen for a brief amount of time. Our next challenge was to decide how a player picks the item up. Using a controller, it just seemed well and good to have the player stroll over the item. However, this proved to be quite difficult when a monster would detonate into a trove of loot, yet the player just needed that one specific item. Eventually, we added the ability for the player to pace themselves slowly over the loot and stop in the middle of various items on the ground so they could loot the item of their choice, making the looting experience undeniably more open and less hindered. Abilities on controller. Here we realized we need to meet Diablo 3's players' expectations given their previous console experience. In the original Diablo 2, a player had two buttons, left and right mouse click. To access quite a few different abilities, player used hotkeys to rapidly remap these two buttons. With a controller, this was adjusted to not remap, but to have buttons straightforwardly trigger the abilities. At that point, we showed these abilities in a similar fashion to Diablo 3 in a tray on the lower part of the HUD. In any case, considering that players can have a substantial number of abilities, we've allowed players to hold left trigger to give the player access to another 6 slots, effectively providing 12 slots to dispatch multiple abilities. It's something that I think a lot of people have noticed about the controller is that it offers 12 skill slots, which is a significant advantage over the original 2 slots with remapping options. Having the ability to have 12 abilities on constant beck and call is way better than 2 abilities on a left and a right click, and not only that, but it is a restricted left and right click. So there are some abilities that just do not even go on the left click, and they have to be on the right click. And then we have auras that to take up a click whether we want them to or not. So it's like, with the keyboard and mouse, it's always been this strict sort of choose your skills wisely sort of a thing. But on controller, I mean, I can have literally 6 abilities running at the same time. One of them can be an aura, so five active abilities. You can even have your regular attack on there, which has been a problem in the past with Diablo 2, because when you're trying to, like some abilities, when you run out of mana, don't go to the regular attack, which is very, very bad. And so you have to actually switch to it. So being able to have the regular attack on one of those buttons is definitely very useful. So we've got balancing on controller is the next category here, and this starts with a regular change with the controller is that we have far less buttons on a controller than a keyboard, so we invest a lot of time gauging the trade-offs of button mappings to guarantee the most fundamental abilities are simple to reach. Following the beta, we feel confident we're taking the controller support in a direction that we hope will meet the player's expectations. We're still evaluating edge cases and always looking for ways to polish the experience, but we think we've found the harmony between a modern feel while preserving the classic mechanics. In addition to the controller, the next fundamental change is the way a console player experiences the game online and with others. Console players are accustomed to forming a party with their friends even before they get into a game. Console can easily see what their friends are doing, can jump into games and invite their friends into games. For PC, players have an easy-to-use keyboard. The original game used a lobby for players to meet up and play together. Interacting with a stream of comments from players in the general chat was nearly impossible on a controller. Because of this, we made a few changes to player flow. I mean, just because it's difficult to interact with a keyboard doesn't mean you need to remove the ability to use a keyboard altogether. If some people would like to plug in a keyboard and chat, I don't understand why you would take that away. Playing on the go. One of the great features on the Nintendo Switch system is its on-the-go capabilities. The ability to undock your Nintendo Switch and take your game with you on a trip or just to another room in the house. This feature and play pattern requires some special attention to ensure that switching between offline and online is an easy thing for players to do. As a part of this effort, we focused on making the game readable for the portable screen, so Diablo II Resurrected on the go will be a seamless experience. Players on the Nintendo Switch yearning to play with friends online will be able to group up alongside up to 4 players. We found that 4-player co-op was the optimal experience when playing on Nintendo Switch system, especially in handheld mode. We hope that players will enjoy all the fun playing Diablo II Resurrected on the go. What? They've restricted Diablo 2 Resurrected on Nintendo Switch to 4-player co-op instead of 8-player. I'm a little a little taken back by that. That is not a good thing in any way, shape, or form for the console version, for any of the console versions, to be reduced to 4 players. That's something they did to the to Diablo 3 because I guess they felt like the systems couldn't handle it or whatever, but that's not good. Cross progression and cross generational play. Diablo II Resurrected has cross progression, meaning you can keep your progress where you play. Players just need to link their Battle.net account to each supported platform they own on Diablo II Resurrected. Once that's done, your character's loot will become available across all supported platforms, and you'll also be able to retain your level, quest, progress, skills, and talents as well. On top of cross progression, Diablo II Resurrected will also feature cross-generational play. So if you have Xbox Series X/S and your friend has an Xbox One, you'll still be able to party up in Sanctuary and slay demons. Players on PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 consoles will also be able to reap the same benefits as they quest east. Play modes. There are many ways for a player to play Diablo II Resurrected: online, offline, ladder, not available for offline characters, non-ladder, hardcore, expansion, and non-expansion. In the original game, the names of these different modes were confusing to new players. If you recall, the original game's menu listed the following options: single player, Battle.net, gateway Battle.net, and other multiplayer. Which that was actually really confusing, to be honest. Yep. So that's the old one, and this is the new one. So play online, offline. We've got an assassin there running her dual guitars, something that we didn't get to play during the beta. The problem was discovered is many players would start the game in single player and then want to start playing with their friends. However, because they selected single player, which was an offline character, they wouldn't play with friends. They couldn't play with friends. We wanted to funnel as many players as possible into a character that they could play with friends. Therefore, we have a giant play button, and the only thing a player has to choose is between offline or online. Inviting your friends. Rather than exchanging information about a lobby, we added the ability for players to just jump right into a game, and then once there, invite their friends from their friends list. While practically expected at this point in games, it didn't exist 20 years ago. In addition to this, we have also added the auto party feature, which is really good at getting you killed by PKers. In the original game, the first thing players would do when they joined a game was type PP, which means party please. Given that nearly every single player would try to find a group with this method, we decided to make it something that actually happens automatically with the auto party feature. Let me go back here for just a second here. I don't know. I was trying to see if they said whether there was going to be local multiplayer. They didn't really say. Party Finder. Our team still wanted an easy, streamlined way for console players to play with non-friends, so we built the Party Finder. This feature is targeted for a player who wants to do a certain activity, such as a quest or a bail run, and wants to do it with other players, but may not have their friends online at the time. The Party Finder will match you with other players or of a similar level who have also selected the same activity. Following the beta, we saw a lot of console players requesting more options to better navigate through lobbies. We've added bosses and zones tab to the Party Finder so players can better coordinate on that front. In addition, the Pandemonium event, Uber Diablo events, and PvP/dueling filters have been added so console players can more easily connect to multiplayer sessions regarding those activities. Overall, we needed to focus our console decisions on a very different player than the PC audience. Given that many of our players have had more experience with Diablo 3 on the console, we needed to onboard them into the world of Diablo 2 in a way that was approachable for them without changing what made Diablo 2 the classic that it is. The hope is that we share what was amazing about this timeless classic with a whole new group of players. Robert Gallerani, design director. Really, there is not a better time to be a Diablo fan, regardless of whether you are new to this game or a long-term fan itching for a dose of nostalgia. The doors of hell are open to you. We're excited to share Diablo II Resurrected with you and hope you'll join us at launch. The adventure begins on September 23rd, and for this platform are coming soon. If you want to learn more about Diablo II Resurrected, check out our website here for real-time updates or follow the official Twitter. Alright, so that's the article. It's a rather lengthy article there. It was about 20 minutes of reading, wasn't it? And, you know, a little bit of commentary here and there. But let's quickly go over this just to talk about the various things. Movement on the controller. They're talking about, you know, your stamina draining, how the thumbstick controls your movement, your run, and your walk, and how walk has a lot of buffs to it. If you guys are unaware of this, in Diablo 2 and in Diablo 2 Resurrected, when you walk, you gain a lot of bonuses, or rather, when you're running, you gain a lot of negatives, would be more of the point. So negatives in Diablo 2 are things like block percentage being reduced, defense being null and void, things like that. Running is generally a bad thing in Diablo 2. Of course, a lot of people still run anyway and take those negatives, but trust me when I say your character is much weaker when he's running than when he's not. And it's interesting that they focused on that, making sure that players could walk if they needed to get that added bonus. Targeting on a controller, I think, is very interesting. It definitely works, but one thing I did notice on console is that it almost works a little too well. Like, even when I'm fighting monsters, I'm picking up loot. So as you can see here with the looting on controller thing, they're talking about that it has like a little cone, and the cone is in front of you, and it allows you to pick up items. Well, most of the time when I was fighting, I would on controller, I would always end up like with a completely full inventory of junk, because the game would almost prioritize the loot over the monsters, like 99% of the time. So to fight the monsters, you would either have to be full, or like actively picking up the loot underneath their feet, so that then it would target the monster, which was just a little odd. Granted, I know that people are going to try and rush in and pick up loot, so I'm not really sure how to balance that, but it just seemed kind of silly that like I was always full of junk on my character, my controller character, whereas on the PC I wasn't always full of junk. I could more pinpoint what I was clicking on, which was interesting. Then we have abilities on controller, and it talks about how they have the 12 slots, and 12 slots is a pretty big deal. A lot of people have talked about this. The 12 slots that they give you on controller is opening up a whole new world of things in Diablo 2. I mean, yes, in Diablo 2 on the PC, you can very quickly swap between certain keys, and you can use your abilities differently. But the thing about having them all available at the same time is that if you can, have literally 6 abilities on a bar and then 6 more on a swap, you don't have to go down here and click and change things. You don't have to go up here and press the hotkeys. They're just all instantly available to you, and this does make for some very interesting changes, especially for characters that are very multi-skill based. Like, for instance, a martial art assassin is going to have a lot easier time on a controller than he ever or she ever had on PC, because martial arts assassins tend to use multiple skills. Like if you're a Phoenix Strike assassin, which is kind of rare. But if you're a Phoenix Strike assassin, you've got Phoenix Strike, you got Thunder Claws, you got Ice Claws, you got Cobra Strike, you got Fire Fist, you got Tiger Strike. You got all these skills. You got your kick on there. You got multiple kicks. Your teleport kick, which is going to be used sometimes too. So you've got all these different abilities, and every single one of them can go on a different hotkey, which is really nice. In fact, I think a lot of PC users are kind of jealous of this in general, just simply because having multiple slots is something that I think PC users have always wanted. We only have left and right click. Kind of makes me want them to add like one other slot that we can use for non-aura, non-right click skills, or just any skill in general, but not auras, obviously, because we can't dual auras. Balancing on the controller, I mean, they're just trying to make sure that it's a good experience. That's basically what I get here, and I can understand that. This part is kind of threw me for a loop, just a really big loop. Let's take a look at Necromancer real quick. He's using his bone spear or bone spirit. It looks better. It definitely looks better. There was a problem with Bone Spirit in the alpha. That was the only time we ever got to see it. It looks better now. So this playing on the go thing threw me for a loop. And they're talking about they limited consoles to 4 players, 4-player online co-op, and that is just very, very sad. Diablo 2 is based around 8 players, and limiting the Nintendo Switch to 4 players is going to change a lot of people's minds. Now, granted, you can still take your character from Nintendo Switch and you can bring them over to the PC or the Xbox if you log into your account, and you can transfer that progress. So I mean, you're still getting Diablo 2 Resurrected on the go, but I really wish they had tried a little harder, maybe to get that 8 players to work on Nintendo Switch. Maybe it's a technical limitation. Maybe they really just couldn't make it work on the limited system. But that's a sad one right there, and that's going to affect a lot of people's decision to go with the Nintendo Switch version. I mean, granted, you still get to play your Nintendo Switch and you're at work on your lunch break or something like that, but cross progression and cross generational play. So basically, what they've said here is that cross generational play is going to be an added thing. So if you're on Xbox, any of the Xboxes that have access to the game, you can play with each other. If you're on any of the PlayStations that have access to the game, you can play with each other. And there are multiple, obviously, PlayStation 4s and Xboxes and Xbox Series, series, and there's not multiple PS5s as far as I know, but this play mode thing is interesting. I mean, basically what they're saying is that this is confusing, and I don't necessarily think this is confusing per se. I mean, they could have just said online BattleNet would have made a good option there. But I guess what they're going for is, I don't know if you've noticed that this play button here. So when you click this play button, it just puts you in a game. Like, it just automatically makes a game with a random game name and a random game password, and it just throws you into a game. Like, there's no like question about it. There's no what difficulty mode do you want. There's none of that. Like, it just throws you into a game. So I guess what they're trying to do here is they're trying to make sure either that you're choosing online or offline, which is the only thing that they want you to choose. I'm really kind of disappointed here because I wanted to see if they were going to enable local co-op, which I really hope that they do. So they took away TCIP, but I mean, maybe they'll still enable some sort of local co-op mode, but they didn't really give us anything here to let us know that was going to be a thing, which is a little sad. Inviting from friends list is a thing. I found out during the beta that inviting, if you have somebody on your friends list who wants to kill you, it makes it very easy for them to get into your game and kill you, because then they can join your game without knowing the username or the password. So they just automatically join, and then they know the username and password once they've joined the game, by the way, and they can give it to others. The auto party feature also made PKing extremely easy, because people would join, immediately be invited to the group. They would know exactly where you are. They would leave the group, and then they would go and attack. And then I also noticed that the auto party feature was being used by the PKers to escape death as well. So when the PKers came to try and kill you, and they started to die, they would just open up the party panel and accept the party invites that were being sent to them by all the players who were sending auto party invites. I think they've got a little bit of work to do as far as the PK system is concerned, because this auto party feature and the friend invite are both allowing for some pretty crazy PK opportunities. Granted, of course, during the beta, it was really magnified by the fact that the hostile noise, there's this really loud hostile noise, was very difficult to hear, or it didn't play at all most of the time. And then also the little hostile icon, which is usually up in the top, was also very, very difficult to see. Party Finder is this is where they're talking about, like, you know, us not having keyboards on the console, and so we need this ability to join games with randoms. And you notice how in the beginning of this they're very specific about, like, if a player is online and they have no friends online at the time, like they're specifically trying to like be like, oh well, nobody wants to play pubs anyway, everybody wants to play in groups, so we're just gonna, we're just gonna make it so that you can't play with pubs, But here's a way that you could play with pubs if you want to. So you click a button and you join a random game that has the same requirement. Now here's my problem with this. Okay, so when in the lobby, when you're looking at games, one of the things you look at is the time the game has been running. So like, say if I was joining a bail run. If the bail run's been running for 1 minute, I know it's safe to join the game, and I'm going to get in there, and we're going to kill bail, and we're going to get some EXP. If the bail run's been running for 24 minutes, I know not to join that bail run. Is this Party Finder gonna have those distinctions in mind? Am I going to be able to put little check marks, like do not join game that has been running for more than X number of minutes? Do not join game that only has 1 player or 2 players. I want a game that has like 5 or 6 or 7. Because you don't join games based on solely what the objective is. You join games based on, number 1, how many players are in the game. Number 2, how long the game has been running. Number 3, the objective. Number 4, the level of the characters inside the game. Number 5, you also look at other things like the little written text. If somebody has something written down, like maybe they did Act 2 start, and then maybe in the thing they said, I have the staff. Which would be weird, but that kind of little written thing can be helpful to know the person's mind, the one who created the game, and what their intention is. Also, as we found out the other day, this wasn't in this article, but they have restrictions on each one of these things, so you can't just make a Mephisto game if you're in Act 2. You can't make a Cow King game unless you've beaten Bale on that particular difficulty setting, which is a little odd. And you can't join a Cow King game if you haven't defeated Bale on that difficulty setting, which is also really odd. You don't have to beat Bale to go into the Cow level, but you do have to beat Bale to create the Cow level. So in normal difficulty, for instance, if you kill Bale in normal difficulty, you go to Nightmare, and in Nightmare difficulty, you can go back. So you can create a normal difficulty game, and then you go to Act 1 and you grab the leg in the Tomatown portal, you put it into the cube and you craft it, and it makes the red portal. Well, anybody who joins the game can go into the portal. It's not limited. You can be a level 1 character in the portal. And it just seems rather odd that they would restrict off the Cow level games to people who have beaten normal difficulty. Or people who have beaten Nightmare difficulty, or people who have beaten Hell difficulty. A lot of people actually go into the Cow level even as low-level characters. I'm not really sure about that one. And then, of course, we've got final notes here by Rob Gallerani, and he's talking about we needed to focus our console decisions on very different player audience, and he's talking about the Diablo 3 audience. So they're desperately worried, essentially, that the Diablo 3 audience is not going to like the game, which is very sad, because Diablo 2 is so much better of a game than Diablo 3, and they said it multiple times in here, by the way. So up here, when they were talking about the skills, they specifically said that the skills were in a similar fashion to Diablo 3 in a tray on the lower part of the HUD. And then they also, again, he says down here, that we're dealing with a different player base, and the player base had more experience with Diablo 3 on console, and we need to onboard them into the world of Diablo 2. And I can kind of understand why they're worried, but Diablo 2 has always been a throw us in there kind of a game. Alright, well, I'm not trying to keep this running forever. This was a rather lengthy article, and there was a lot of little points to go over, and I do appreciate you guys and gals always watching my videos. And keep watching.